At a certain point on your spiritual awakening journey, perhaps after a moment of radiant insight or following a collapse that shattered your ego, you begin to sense that something has quietly shifted. You start to see through the illusions of life, the old repeating patterns, the surrounding noise, and then silence. At first, that silence feels like a cleansing stream, powerful and renewing, as if you were being reborn. But over time, that feeling begins to fade. Not like a storm suddenly ending, but more like sunlight quietly leaving a room, silent and without warning. It's as if your soul turned down the volume of life and then forgot to turn it back up. You stop chasing. You stop yearning. Not out of surrender, but because of a deep letting go, as though exhaling in weariness at the existential nature of life. And then a question begins to echo within you, clear as a voice in stillness. Why have I become numb, even after seeing the truth? Here, a profound paradox begins to emerge. Before we go deeper into this journey of inner exploration, if something you've heard resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe to Mind and Meaning. A like, a comment. They're not just support, but signs that you are here, you are awakening, and you are walking this path. We read every word because every honest voice matters. We often imagine spiritual awakening as a dazzling flash of light, something that ignites the soul and fills us with a renewed passion for life. But in reality, for many, especially for the introspective, the deeply empathetic, the seekers of truth beneath the surface of existence, awakening doesn't arrive with brilliance. It arrives as a void, quiet, slow, unremarkable on the outside. I remember a friend, someone profoundly thoughtful, immersed in the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti, who once went through a dark night of the soul. Afterward, she told me she had seen clearly, seen the ego as an illusion, seen the pursuit of success and image as games of the mind. But just weeks later, she couldn't get out of bed. She said, "I used to suffer because I hadn't achieved enough. Now I don't care about achieving anything at all. I thought awakening would make me bloom, but it feels like I'm dissolving." Carl Jung, who rarely used the word spiritual in the popular sense, understood this phenomenon deeply. He once said that enlightenment does not come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It sounds sacred, but the truth is, it's brutal for the ego. Because when the light shines into the deepest layers of the unconscious, the first thing to collapse is the old structure. Your identity, your ambitions, your values. Everything you once believed made up the sense of me. And when the ego can no longer cling to the familiar, it becomes lost. Not because it has vanished, but because it has lost its direction. So no, you're not depressed. You're not unmotivated. You're simply in a transitional space, a liminal zone where the old has fallen away and the new has yet to take form. Jung called this the sacred void, the in-between state that most of us try to avoid, because it offers no light, no map, no promises. But it is precisely there, in that seemingly meaningless emptiness, where the foundation for individuation is laid, where you begin the slow becoming of who you were always meant to be. But no one prepares you for this part, do they? No one tells you that after the light comes the fog. And it is within that fog, within that quiet disorientation, that something deeper is quietly unfolding. Losing motivation is not a regression. It may be the soul's quantum leap, if you understand it rightly. Before we continue, if you are someone searching for the essence of existence, if you long to go beyond the surface of life and touch the deepest layers of consciousness, don't forget to subscribe to Mind and Meaning. This is where we give you the language to name the unnameable, to help you stand firm on your awakening journey. A journey that is beautiful, yet often makes you feel lost along the way. If you're feeling empty, indifferent, disconnected from everything that once inspired you, know that you're not alone, and you're not broken. You're simply in the midst of a complete reconfiguration of consciousness. A transformation so deep, it doesn't just shift how you think. It rewrites your entire inner operating system. The goals that once kept you up at night, the plans you once chased with all your passion, suddenly feel meaningless. Not because you're weak, but because your motivation, once fueled by the ego, is collapsing. Carl Jung saw this long ago. He called that part of the self the persona, the mask we wear to survive in the world. But awakening is the moment that mask falls away. And when you're no longer driven to prove yourself, to be loved, to win, the old fuel simply disappears. You become like a character who's stepped off the stage, looking at the play of your life and realizing you no longer belong to that script. You're not losing motivation, you're outgrowing the engine that once powered it. To Jung, we weren't born to serve the ego. The purpose is not to reinforce the mask, but to integrate the ego into a greater order. A wholeness he called individuation. Not the fragile self that craves praise, but the soul-centered self that seeks to express truth through this body, in the midst of ordinary life. And once that process begins, you'll find you can no longer pretend. You can't do work you don't believe in. You can't maintain relationships you no longer feel. You can't chase dreams that were made for a version of you that no longer exists. That's why awakening is often described as both liberating and disorienting. And Jung warned, if you stop here, you will get stuck. Some people after awakening fall into a kind of spiritual avoidance, hypnotizing themselves into believing nothing matters, that there's no need to act, no need to show up. But that is retreat, not surrender. The transcendent self does not reject life. It longs to live through you, authentically. It doesn't ask you to disappear from the world. It only asks that you return, with your role redefined and your awareness purified. To enter a more authentic stage of life, you must first pass through a strange threshold, a liminal space Carl Jung described with remarkable subtlety, but one few recognize when they themselves are standing in it. This is the quiet phase after awakening, not the glowing light of meditations in Bali, not the poetic quotes posted on social media, but pure stillness. It's the moment you sit alone in silence, unable to name what you feel, while the world around you continues to spin in chaos. Jung wouldn't say you're lost. He would call this the in-between, the place where the ego has begun to dissolve, but the true self is not yet fully formed to guide you. And this space, the void between collapse and rebirth, is in truth a sacred rite of passage. But in a world that worships productivity and speed, stillness is easily mistaken for stagnation. The pause is often misread as failure. Then you begin to question yourself, am I falling behind? But no, it is this very judgment that blocks the deep current within you. Jung called this phenomenon enantiodromia, the principle by which anything, when taken to its extreme, naturally turns into its opposite. After awakening, your inner pendulum swings from one pole, the cravings of the ego, to the other, soul-level stillness. You shift from, what should I do, to, is there truly anything left that needs doing? And that movement, though paradoxical, is the sacred balance. In ancient symbols and myths, this is the time of the hermit, when a person retreats inward to let the old self die before a new one can be born. Like a caterpillar dissolving entirely in its cocoon, no longer a caterpillar, not yet a butterfly, just a shapeless chaos of potential. And in that dissolution, the ego begins to panic. It demands direction, goals, identity. But the self, the quiet inner core, whispers only this: let go. Something deeper is being born. It is at this point that many modern spiritual paths rush too quickly. They tell you to stay positive, to follow your bliss. But Jung warned, if you avoid the darkness, you also abandon the treasures hidden within it. He believed that only by facing the parts of us we reject, the anger, the fear, the sorrow, can we become whole. Not as an optional add-on, but as an essential step in the soul's evolution. So when you feel empty, tired, unmotivated, you're not going the wrong way. You're in the deepest layer of psychic digestion. Your consciousness is restructuring itself, shedding outdated drives to make room for a new impulse, one that arises from much deeper ground. And here's the wonder. When you stop resisting the emptiness, a subtle movement begins to emerge. Not a frantic push like before, but a gentle call from within, as if your soul is remembering something that was long forgotten. Jung called this the emergence of the self, not just as a concept, but as a living direction. You no longer live to prove, you live to express what is true. This new drive doesn't come from anxiety or comparison, but from honest inspiration. This is not a return to your old life. It is the birth of a new one. Not announced by a grand parade, but by the softest heartbeat. This is when the self begins to speak. Not through words, but through intuition, symbols, dreams. Jung called this symbolic living, when each ordinary experience becomes a whisper from the soul. And living from the self doesn't mean a life without highs and lows. You may still feel lost, exhausted, or alone, but you will no longer feel like you are betraying yourself. Instead of forcing yourself into old molds, you begin to create, even when no one is watching. You know how to say no to what no longer fits, even if it looks ideal on the surface. You choose peace over performance, curiosity over checklists, harmony over hustle. This is your new fuel. No longer adrenaline, but connection. And when you live from this place, ambition doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes devotion to truth, to presence, to depth. Ironically, this new motivation makes you more creative and effective than ever, but now without the force. Jung called this action from the soul, where you act not because you should, but because every part of you whispers, this is the right thing. So if you felt your inner fire go out after awakening, understand this. It wasn't the end. It was just the old flame dying, making space for a deeper light. A light that no longer flickers in the wind, a steady flame lit from within. Carl Jung never promised that becoming yourself would be easy. But if you're still listening now, it means you are on the right path. This is not the end of awakening, but the first chapter of something far greater. The journey home to your true self. If what I've just shared has touched something within you, if it helps you name a vague feeling, a phase you quietly pass through, please leave a few words in the comments below. I truly want to hear your journey, because sometimes just being seen and understood is already part of healing. And if your soul longs to continue these kinds of conversations, where we illuminate our inner world together, explore the depths of consciousness, and walk the path back to the self, don't forget to accompany us on the Mind and Meaning channel, because awakening is not the end. It is an invitation, opening the first chapter in the true book of who you are.